Welcome back to Cherry Picking, and today we are going to be doing the engine swap on the 67 F250. Now, here at the Cherry Picking headquarters, we like to start and stop a lot of projects, and this is one of them. This is the project that we're going to go ahead and just start again, even though we have way too many going on. But this here is my 1967 Ford F250. This was the truck that I drove in high school, and I drove it for a few years after high school, and it pretty much served as not only my work truck but my dad's work truck for the past few years. It served us well. It has been a great truck. I have had very few problems in this truck. We threw in a 360 from, I believe, a 73 F100 or F250 truck that we had that was basically garbage. My dad bought the truck for $300 back 20 years ago, and he only bought it because the motor ran, and it wasn't a great motor, and it probably had a few 100,000 miles on it, but it ran. And so we put it in this truck. But we got to get this truck out front, and to be completely honest, I was a little worried before starting this video, because not only am I in the midst of another, well, 3 other projects. This one is supposed to be a quick project. We all have those quick projects, and to be completely honest, this truck has been sitting back here now for I think about a year, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. And what's going to happen if you look inside this beautiful camper that I just got this camper shell. It's an awesome camper shell. It was completely free to me, and I cannot complain. I just got to fix up some of the wiring, fix a few things here and there, clean it up, but it's nice. But the reason we are getting this truck out is because, if I can get this undone, we are going to be putting this, what I believe to be a 390, although I haven't actually checked yet. It could be a 360. Pretty sure it's a 390, but it might be a 360. We're going to put this motor in this truck, and I'll explain why once we get it out front. So I'm just going to close this back up. Like I said, I just got this camper only a few weeks ago, and that's kind of what started me on this journey of getting this truck back on the road. So like I said, this truck actually hasn't ran in about a year. However, I did come out here, throw a battery in it, and just make sure it started. And all it did was needed a cranking, a little bit of choke. I mean, a pump or two. There it goes. There it is. Look at that. Got my F600 or 700 dash in there with my nice tack. And I don't know if you can see, but it does smoke just a little bit, but it is running. So let's try to get this out front. Like I said, this thing hasn't started in about a year, and it started up just fine, threw a battery in it. So this gas and tank's kind of old, and we actually poured a lot of old gas in it, but it hasn't driven really in probably a little bit longer now. We put it here a year ago. Actually, we put it here a little bit more than a year ago. Came out here once or twice to, oh God, it's dusty. It is really dusty in here. It's full of crap. I actually had to empty out some of the stuff because I couldn't even sit on the seat because we were using it as storage. But it has not moved, and it is moving. And that kind of felt stuck for a second. And power steering is gone right now. We have no power steering left, which is not surprising. I've always had a power steering leak. And let's hope, I don't know if this camper's gonna make it through the trees. Yeah, that works. I don't know if you can see, but there's a ton of smoke pouring out the exhaust. And I'm gonna explain to you what's happening while I open up the hood here. So first, let's start off. I've shown this truck before on one video, but let's start fresh. This is my 1967 Ford F250 Ranger. Again, I've had this truck since high school. Actually, if my dad has had it longer, sitting in the backyard. He obtained this truck back in 2007 or 8. And so after all that, we are about ready to swap. I gotta go get the engine hoist out, and I gotta get some tools out, and we got to start taking things apart. So let's do that now. Okay, so we have the truck turned around at the moment because we're actually gonna do this under the shade here and be smart. We have to take the motor out of the back and put it on a tire right over here so that we don't have to walk around the truck. And then we'll turn the truck around and do everything right here. Okay, got the motor out. Now we're going to turn this truck around and start taking things off. Okay, and now we go through the fun stuff, taking everything off. Bet your hood doesn't open that easy. All right. Okay, so my dad already took the cap off and all the plugs off. So now we pretty much got to take all the radiator crap out, take the radiator out, undo the power steering and set it aside. Take the heater hoses off. What else? Take the ground off the block. Undo the starter. Actually, yeah. Start with that first. Okay. So, I'm standing here in the inside the engine bay because we are pretty much at the point of lifting this thing out. Only 3 bolts left. I got all the bell housing bolts off. Got all the exhaust bolts off except for one on the top over here. It's just really tight and it's kind of an awkward spot and it's hard to get to from underneath. So I'm going to try to get it from here on top. I got the bell housing bolts on top here. So all that I have left are the 2 motor mounts and that 1 exhaust bolt. And then this thing is ready to come out. We have all the accessories off. We haven't taken the carburetor off. I don't know if we're going to be taking that off or not because we're probably just going to put a chain on each side of the head, the same exact one that's on that motor. All in all, it went pretty easily. It didn't take too long. I took my time. I wasn't trying to rush it, and it was pretty easy. Okay, so we've got everything off. Every single bolt is off, and now we are going to put the chain on the other motor and pull it out. We're going to take the hood off. It's just not going to fit through the hood. And then we'll pull the motor out. So we just got to put the chain on the 2 bolts. I'm going to go wash my hands real quick because I'm totally forgot to record it because we just did it, but we just ripped the hood off real quick, had my brother come out and help. Super easy. So now pull the engine out, and then we power wash this situation because it is covered in oil down there. Just grab your dead boys, man. You don't need to move it forward, you just need to go up. We're not going to clear. Yep, it's completely clear. Just need to go all the way up. Okay, so the transmission is finally out. Took a little bit, but nothing too crazy. So now we have a completely empty and clean engine bay. There's the old T18. It is nasty greasy. That thing is soaked. It's mostly power steering fluid for the most part because we have a really leaky box. But other than that, this thing is ready to get pushed over there, and we're gonna just do a little bit of cleaning so that not all of this oil makes it. So, see you in a sec. So, I'm trying to get out of the sun. I'm sitting inside the engine bay at the moment. I forgot to show, we lifted the NP 435 in. We actually used the engine hoist to lift it up from inside the cab, so I'll put a picture of it right now. And once we got it lifted up, we put the cross member back forward, put the bolt in, and now I'm just bolting the bell housing with all of the clutch parts back in. And I'm just, right now, the reason I'm in here to do the bell housing because these top bolts are kind of a butt to get from down there. So I'm just getting them from up here, tightening them from up here. And then, after that, I believe we're ready to drop the engine in, right? Once the clutch stuff is done? Cool, so I'm going to get this bolted up. And once the transmission's bolted up, you'll see us dropping the motor in. All right, transmission officially on. TOO, transmission officially on. And something that my father pointed out that I did not test yet was that the actual location of the bit, well, I don't have a clutch. I don't know why I pressed that. But the actual location of the, it's a little loose. Oh God, it's a little loose. But the actual location of the shifter. How many speeds is this? One, two, 3, 4. Whatever. The location is supposedly better. Okay, so there are a few things we gotta do before we drop it in. We've got to take off this clutch. Okay, so it is, I don't know, like 6-something o'clock. We pretty much finished up for the night. We've got the motor in, it's sat in here, we got the hood back on, and luckily we didn't have to adjust it too bad, but it's sitting in there. It's only got about 4 bolts in it right now, but we will finish it up tomorrow, and maybe the next day if we have to. All right, it is another day. It's a little bit later in the day. It's already about 5-ish o'clock. I've had a busy day today, but got to keep going on the truck. So a few things that I'm getting sorted out. Originally, the plan was to just swap all the accessories we needed to and run this motor as it is, because it is a used motor, nothing crazy. However, after looking at some things, and more particularly seeing how bad this just broke apart even more, this manifold crossover hose for the water pump is. I could just take that out and it'd be a pain in the butt, but I could knock that out and put a new one in. It is possible. But I do want to clean this motor, and it's pretty grimy, it's pretty gross, and to be completely honest, I'm kind of at the point where it's so grimy and gross, plus it's a 2-barrel with an automatic choke, and I don't want to run the automatic choke. I have a manual choke set up in this truck. I like manual choke personally. I don't know if other people do. I don't have to run it as much as most people because I live here in the high desert in California. So we get heat most of the time anyways. So I don't really have to worry about my choke as much as other people. So I like manual choke. So after talking it over a little bit and talking with my dad about it, it's going to add a little bit more work, but we're pretty much just going to swap the manifold that we put on this motor and put it on this motor right here. This will give me a chance to clean this a little bit better, to put better valve covers on, because these ones are pretty badly dented, and although those ones aren't perfect, they're a lot nicer because I've actually already fixed those once before. And really, it's just a matter of 8 to 10 bolts on the manifold. I can't remember exactly how many. Maybe it's 12, I don't remember. On the manifold, and manifold comes off, and then the valve covers, obviously. And then while we're in there, we'll do the valve seals. Since I know that that was an issue on that motor, we'll just do the valve seals while we're here, and we'll know that we have good valve seals in this motor. You know, you could just get it running as it is, and I could, but honestly, I have another day to do it. I'm going to be working on it for another day or two. We have to get a new U-joint for the transmission because the old one is too small. So since that's already there, I'm just going to go ahead and get this intake torn apart tonight and get it all ready to go. Probably tear apart that one as well, and just get it ready to swap in the morning. So we'll do the valve seals in the morning, or I'll do the valve seals in the morning, and I'll show you how to do that, because on these it's pretty easy. It's about an hour-and-a-half job, and then I'll get this cleaned up better, and I won't have to worry about the garbage bypass tube, because the reason we actually weren't going to switch the water pumps, because we knew that this one worked. However, when I saw the hose that was on this motor, I saw that it was totally expanded and blown up, so I told my dad, no, we got to take it off. So he took this off earlier, sent me a picture, and if you notice, there is no bypass tube left. There's supposed to be a little half-inch tube sticking out that crosses over from the intake to the water pump. And we know this water pump is good. It's an aftermarket water pump that is a reinforced style water pump. So we're just going to take this one and my fuel pump, since I have a filtered fuel pump and the old one is not, and switch the fuel pump and the water pump. And since we went that far, I went, you know what, we'll just do the intake while we're at it. So I'm going to go ahead and throw you guys up, and you will watch me just tear apart this entire top end. So let's get to it. Well, I'll tell you what, whoever had this truck last really did not want those valve covers coming off. They glued both sides very thoroughly, and this side really didn't want to come off, and I kind of ruined the valve cover just a little bit. But what's even worse, besides the valve cover, because I'm not using them anyways, so not a huge deal. This side looks pretty good. Doesn't look amazing, but it's not terrible. This side, however, this front section, the back looks great, but this front section is pretty crusty, and I pulled this first one out, and you can see, I think, I don't know how hard it is, but it's pretty crusty, so hopefully those clean up good enough to use, and hopefully nothing is too crazy down there. But we have both rocker arms off, but I'm pretty much going to take, and if you haven't learned this tip, I just take a piece of cardboard, punch a hole for each one, I just used the push rod to punch a hole. I made my mark towards front, plus I labeled it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm just going to put them in order, because when you have a stock flat tappet, you want to make sure that they stay in the same order, because the wear patterns are the same. So I'm going to go ahead and pull all these push rods out, take the distributor out, and then this intake is ready to come off. I got to find a spot to set it, because I'm going to be in the truck, and it weighs about 85 pounds. But yeah, it'll come off in just a second. Well, I'll tell you what, it doesn't look too bad in here. It's relatively clean. There was a little bit of moisture up here at the front at some point, and that head bolt passage is a little gummed up, but it doesn't look insane, nothing too crazy, just a well-worn high mileage motor, which is kind of what we expected. So, not seeing anything crazy. Basically now, I'm going to go ahead and clean off all the gasket surfaces, get a vacuum and try to vacuum up all the crap that fell in, and clean out some of these water ports and anywhere else that might be a potential issue, and get the gasket scraped. This intake, honestly, if I didn't have everything out, like all the accessories off of the front of the truck, this would have been a lot harder to do by myself. I really don't recommend you do this by yourself. It's probably not great for your back, because these do weigh, I believe, 85 pounds. I think someone weighed them. They weigh about 85 pounds, which is a lot more than it seems like for something as small as this. Nothing too crazy though, a little oily, a little bit of carbon buildup. I'm going to tear this one apart real quick. I got to take everything off of this one because all the accessories are still on it. Plus I need the distributor, because I'm putting this distributor on this motor, and the water pump and the fuel pump. So I need all the accessories, but I'll tear this one apart real quick. And other than that, I'll probably see you tomorrow morning when I'm doing the valve seals and putting this on. So see you tomorrow morning. Hopefully this truck is running tomorrow. All right, oh man, that sun is right there. I got probably about an hour of sun left, maybe even less, 45 minutes. Plans changed a little bit. So we discovered that we still have valve stem seals, as well as all of the gaskets we need to do the intake. However, instead of putting this giant 85-pound 4-barrel intake on that looks like garbage, my dad actually had this aluminum Edelbrock F427 intake, slightly high. I wouldn't call it a high riser, but it's slightly higher than stock, that's been sitting in the garage for over 20 years, give or take, that isn't being used anything. So he said to put it on, so we're going to put this on instead. Plus, it's already pretty clean. Low corroded, and it's got a slight issue that's not a huge deal, but it'll be fine and it'll work. So we're going to put this on. But before we put this on, I'm going to do the valve stem seals, because it's going to be a lot easier to do them with this not impeding in the way. Plus, I don't want to break this. So we're going to do the valve stem seals now, clean off the intake surfaces, and then put on the intake. So let's do that. Okay, so we've got a towel here in the valley, just to keep the keepers from going down. These are 2-piece keepers, which kind of sucks because it means it's going to be more work. I have to take out all the spark plugs so that we can turn the motor over and stuff rope, because how we're going to do this, we're going to see if this tool works. I actually hadn't checked it yet, but this is an old style compression for compressing the springs. Hopefully it works fine. I used one like it when I did this last time in this truck. Hopefully it's going to be a lot easier for me to do since I can stand here in the truck. But basically, you take a spark plug out, you fill the cylinder with rope, you force the piston into it as much as you can so that the valves don't drop when you're doing this, and then you compress it down, take the keepers out, take the spring off, replace the seal, and you do that for every single one. So it's probably going to take about an hour and a half, maybe less if I'm quick, but dealing with all the spark plugs and shoving the rope in there to make sure it's tight enough so that the valves don't drop, you know, it could be fun. So, okay, hello, this is the next morning. The sun was just setting too fast yesterday, so always the loud cars going by. So the sun was setting too fast yesterday, so we only ended up getting this bank over here, 5, 6, 7, 8 done. And I came out here this morning and I've already done, 2, 3, and 4. And so all I have left is number 1, and I wanted to get this on video so that you could all see it very clearly, how to do this. So for valve stem seals on an FE, your intake has to come off, which means your rocker arms have to come off like I already did, and your push rods have to come out. Once you get the 10 bolts that hold your intake on and the 4 bolts on each rocker and all the push rods out, you have access now to your springs. Now, if you're just doing a manifold swap, you can just do that, and then at this point I would just put the next manifold on, which in my case is my aluminum F427 Edelbrock manifold. However, if you're at this step, I think it's worth it to take the extra hour and a half that it takes, if you've got the time, or make the time to do the valve stem seals. There aren't a lot of things that these FEs are known to be unreliable for. There are a few things like the nylon timing gear. These valve stem seals are, to me, one of them. And it's not necessarily that it's the FE's fault, but they are old, and if they haven't been replaced, they are non-existent. Half the ones I took out of this motor were completely broken apart, and some of them were just gone entirely. The rubber gets brittle and it just breaks apart over time. And so if it's never been done before, you want to make sure you do it, because it's kind of necessary. It's going to keep oil from drastically just dumping in your cylinders. And it does do a pretty good job. Even if your valves are tight and up to tolerance, you need to have the valve stem seals, otherwise you're going to be putting oil directly into the cylinders and smoking like crazy at the back. On the last motor I did, on the one over there that came out of this truck, it had a head job at one point in time, so the valve seals were replaced at one point, but they were still completely brittle and breaking apart. However, this head, which from what we can tell has never had a head job done, has never had anything done, they are C8AE heads, they are 68 390 heads with the yellow springs. From what we can tell, it also has the 2-piece retainers, which are supposedly lower performance. I don't know. That's what I was told. But it never had it done. And so half of the valve stem seals were just completely missing. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do it on these FEs. What you're going to want to do is you take all your spark plugs out. You got yourself a 15/16 socket, which is all Ford FEs are all 15/16 on the crankshaft nut. And you basically get your cylinder, whichever one you're working on. So we're working on number 1. You want to get it as low as you can, and you start shoving rope into the cylinder through the spark plug hole. We've got pretty much most of the rope in there. This rope's probably about 10 feet long, maybe a little bit longer. So we've got most of it in there. And now it's kind of tight, so I'm going to see if this is enough. What you're going to do is you're going to push the piston into that rope. And so we have it tight. We're pushing on our crank bolt, and it's tight in there now. Yeah, it's tight in there. So now that we've got that done, we take our valve spring compressor tool. This one is a very old one. It's by KD. It's just one that we found in my dad's toolbox. He has a few of these. When I did the other motor about a year ago, we used a slightly different tool that didn't lock the way this one does. And so this one has been really nice because it locks pretty well. And you can use all types of different tools, but these are probably the best tools for the job because they're made to just slide in there and get right in there. Actually, I can tell I'm already in the wrong spot. You need to get as low as you can on the valve spring because you want to make sure you can get as much pressure as possible. Which I can tell it's already not enough. So if not, I'm going to turn my spring around to get a better position. Try to get in there. Okay. And then this one just pushes straight down on it, just like that. Bada boom. Your spring is released. And now I have a 15mm socket because this is what I had that fits over because these are double retainers. Take it and I'm going to tap it until it drops. And these ones have been pretty easy on this side. And then boom, there's your retainers. They just fall right out. Make sure not to lose them. I have a magnet here just in case. And then you can also take this double retainer piece out and you can just lift the whole spring as a whole. And as you can see, I'm going to take a look in the spring, make sure there's not left. There is no valve spring. There's no stem seal at all on this one. It's completely missing. So you take your new stem seal. It looks like this. These are kind of older, but they're still extremely soft, so they're perfectly usable for this. Now I'm going to go ahead and move the valve stem just a little bit, see if there's any play in it. And this one's really tight, so it's perfect. It's not at all in any way, shape, or form. It's not loose at all. Okay, so I pretty much got all of our gasket surfaces cleaned up, at least to the best of my ability. And I cleaned our water pump gaskets on the front, as well as the fuel pump gasket. And I have some engine degreaser to clean off the front of this motor. I was kind of debating just doing a quick spray job just on the front of it, just to make it look a little bit nicer. But I don't think I'm going to. It's a lot of work. And honestly, this is a work truck, and this motor's not staying in here forever. I did take off the valve covers off that motor because they are actually really nice. They're not perfect. They got some issues, but they are original paint, which we found out. And they're not all destroyed, and they look pretty good. So let's move this. That's an empty can. Probably get this out of the sun for you. So yeah, they're not perfect at all by any means. They, some people would go down and just paint them. But I do like the fact that they're original paint, and to be honest, they don't look super rusty and super gross. So I'm just going to keep them for now. I could put chrome valve covers on, but again, this motor's not supposed to be in here forever. I don't really care. And to be honest, not a huge fan of chrome valve covers anyways. I really like finned aluminum, non-polished aluminum, cast aluminum. I think that looks really good, especially with fins, especially on FEs. So now we basically have to get this thing ready to drop on the motor. We have our bolt spacers for our rear bolts. Now, you don't need these, but these are stock Ford after 68. They put these spacers on the rear bolts because the rear bolts, if you can tell, that's the rear bolt, that's the second to last bolt. The rear bolts sit much lower. And this was initially Ford's design, and it just gave a little bit of more room back here to work on anything you needed to. Like if you need to get to the top bell housing bolts, gives you a little bit more room. Ford realized this wasn't exactly a great design because the bolt stretch that they didn't really account for was different. So they just created these spacers, and these actually came off this motor with the 2-barrel. And so we're putting them back on, especially with the aluminum, because we don't want to have a different torque figure for the aluminum intake. It does have a brass fitting for the bypass tube for the water pump, which is awesome because now we won't have to deal with that completely rusting away like it did on this motor right there. And then it has this. It's not in great shape, but it's good enough, and it's good enough to run. It's not terrible. The underside sticks, I don't know if you can see that, but it sticks down far enough so that there won't be any air bubbles for my heater. Because I do run a heater in this truck. It works extremely well. It just always works super well, and I'd like to keep it because sometimes it does get cold here, especially in winter. We are going to be running this phenolic spacers, 1/4-inch phenolic spacer. This is just to give us a little bit more lift on the Holly, just to make sure we clear the things we need to clear. Although this does have built-in steps to clear the Holly throttle, it does not have a step large enough to clear the choke, which on these carbs is pretty big. So we'll run this 1/4-inch phenolic spacer because we have it. Plus, it'll also help with cooling and keeping the carburetor cool, as well as the aluminum intake. We're will dissipate a lot better. So hopefully this runs extremely cool and we don't have any vapor lock issues or anything like that. All right, it is a little bit while later. We don't actually know. I think it's 7 o'clock now. So it's been a little while. It's been slow rolling a little bit. I don't even know where I last actually left off because the camera's been off probably now for about 3 or 4 hours. I've just been doing little things. My dad's been back and forth, and there's been a few things that I just can't do with one hand or 2 hands or whatever. But I'll tell you where we're at. So we still don't have the intake on, as you can see, but I'm continuing to get it prepped. There were a lot of little things that had to be fixed. I did put the fuel pump on, got it clean and put on. And I did do the clutch linkage bracket. That was a big thing that I kept telling myself that I didn't want to do, so I kept putting it off. But my dad was gone, and I was sitting here, and I was like, oh, what else do I do? Twiddling my thumbs, and I went, well, got to do that clutch, and I got to make sure all the bell housing bolts are secure. So I went under there and tightened up all the bell housing bolts, as well as the clutch bracket, and make sure the clutch works, and it works great. It feels very different than the clutch that was in here. Which is a good thing actually, and my old clutch, it was okay. It had a weird feeling to it, and it also chirped really bad when you pressed all the way into the pedal. And it wasn't the clutch that chirped, it was actually something with the bracket. So it actually has the bracket that came off this motor. It looked a lot nicer than my bracket, and then I'm going to grease it up, and hopefully it feels great. It's really weird with the new transmission. This NP 435 is such a different transmission compared to the T18. It's very similar and different at the same time. The first gear is the same high non-synchro. However, reverse is actually over and down non-synchro, which is opposite of the T18, which is actually up. But it goes your first, which is a really tight, I mean, that's a pretty small movement. It's only about 3 inches worth of movement, into second, which is not much, and then into third, which is also not much movement. And by much movement, I mean the actual travel. On the T18, it went up a lot higher. It went up, every single gear was pretty much as long as first gear is. I went ahead and cleaned out the carburetor. I just sprayed it down. I know it works, I know it's good. And then if we come over here, we'll see. So I put on all the, there's your water temp gauge and a plug, because we don't need to run anything else off of this. And then the vacuum for my vacuum gauge, as well as brake booster. And then I put on my linkage for my carb, for springs, as well as this is the ground for the cab to the motor. And then I put in, just now, I just put in these studs. I had to go get new studs because the original studs are way longer because they're made for a 1-inch spacer. And now that we're only running the tiny little phenolic spacer, and this is already pretty high, we just needed to run smaller ones. So I still got to drive this one down a little bit further, but these are all in. So it's the while we're here stuff that's really slowing us down. And there's another thing that is now going to push us back a little bit further. Not a huge deal, hopefully, but this truck has always had a serious issue with its power steering. With the non-assisted power steering, it makes it impossible to turn this truck when the power steering is all gone. So we're gonna do that while we're here because it's a lot easier to reach that when there's no valve cover in the way, and everything else. So it's just gonna add another probably 40-50 minutes, maybe another 2 hours to this job. So we're gonna do the steering box seal. Sorry, I'm getting tired. We're gonna do the steering box seal right now if we can, or at least get it ready to do for tomorrow if we have to. So pretty much what we gotta do, I already undid this clip from the steering column because we gotta take the entire steering column out. So I gotta drop 2 bolts holding it up there, the 4 bolts on this side holding it in. Those look to be 7/16, and these look to be 9/16. And then we have 3 bolts and a clamp holding 3 bolts on the firewall on the back side, holding a bracket on with a clamp that bands to the steering wheel, and then a single 7/16, and then the steering column comes out. So I'm gonna do this real quick. I'm gonna let you know how that one goes, This is super easy though, because it's just these few bolts. So let's do those now. Well, I can tell right now that this is gonna suck because the inner one went way too easy. So naturally, this one's gonna suck. It's a little hard to get to. No big deal. I need 7/16. Okay.
I'm gonna go out and measure the yoke on the U-joint on the.
Do you want to take the steering column out? Because this is it. All right. Now that we got that out, you can pretty much see the steering box right there. So we need to take a circlip out, and then there's two seals right behind that. I'll show you in this kit here. So if you have a Ford with this style box, I actually don't remember what style this is. I think this is that Saginaw box. So I'm pretty sure this used to have a Bendix and we put a Saginaw, but honestly, I can't remember. This is the circlip that's got to come out, and then there's these two seals, which I don't actually know which way they're supposed to go, so I have to be careful pulling them out to make sure I figure out the direction. And then we take the seals out, which is probably going to be the hardest part of the job. These two new ones in, and then you put the circlip back in. So I'm going to go ahead and try to take that circlip out. I don't know if I'll make a video of it. It's going to be really hard to record that, plus my hands are really gross. So it's kind of hard to hold. So it's going to be hard, but I'm going to get the circlip out. I'm going to have to clean that out first. So I'm going to spray it down with some parts cleaner and then try to get that circlip out, and I'll show you how I get the seals out once they're out. Okay, it is the next day. Kind of took a break yesterday. Just long day. My dad was doing something else. I was doing something else. But it became a whole thing. So took a day off. You know, sometimes you just got to take a day. So we are back. Today's actually Monday now, and we are officially actually putting on the intake. I don't even know where I last left off on Saturday, but you know, everything that I pointed out right just a second ago that's been done is done. We are putting on the intake, and I am still doing the steering box, but I'm going to move on to that after this intake is on, because once this intake is on, I can set up the rest of everything by myself, no problem. But this intake is hard to do by myself with the gaskets, and plus the fact that the sealing surfaces aren't perfect in the back. And then we will move on to the steering box, and then we also have a new U-joint for the different size U-joint, because we had to get a larger one. So I'm going to hop in there right now, and you'll watch us do this intake. We have our gaskets here. As you can see, we're just using the cork and the metal ceramic coated, whatever they are. So let's do that now. Okay, first things first, taking our fake Indian head, which is really lions or whatever. It's a Permatex product, I think. Oh, Versachem. It's Versachem. Shellac, and we're going to go on the China walls. Just a light layer on the China walls. So, we're shellacked. Gaskets, and they only go one way. Yep. I'm trying to remember they go like that. Yep. And they sit in those bent fucking head gaskets.
Yes, they do. You might have to straighten those out.
So we're going to go back with our shellac. Go. Okay, turned off on me. I was in the process of explaining that you got to get the bolts just started, back, front, whatever. We had to take it back off. The aluminum intake has a slight warpage to it and just wasn't going. Okay, there appears to be sand in the block. It was warped and it just wasn't working out because the front was not sealing. So took it back off, and exactly what I said about just needing cork and shellac, well, it doesn't count for aluminum warped machined intakes apparently. So took it back off, laid a bead of gasket sealant on the cork gasket, not a ton, but just a rough bead. just to make sure it actually does. It was sealed fully in the back. I put a thin layer back there. It was fully sealed on the back. We could see it on the intake, but for some reason at the dowel pin area, it's not that it wasn't going into the dowel pin that's normally here, which sometimes you have to take out. You have to check your intake to make sure there's a dowel pin recess so that it fits. Otherwise, you take the pin out entirely. We got it gooped up, so we're about ready to put it back on again and try this one more time. All right, totally forgot to record setting this back on, but out of some chance, all of these bolts on this side went right on. They didn't even hesitate, and they're all in their holes perfectly. And on the other side, I believe 2 or 3 out of the 5 are also in their holes. So I don't know if we slightly warped it just enough or just compressed the gaskets enough the first time, but all of these are in. So we'll tighten them all up, make sure they're torqued. Okay, so now we're going to do our valve cover gasket, and I'll show you just how I do them. I don't really care about being able to take it back off. If I ever take the valve covers off, I don't want to save the gasket, specifically if I'm using a quart gasket. I'm not trying to save it if I have to take it back off. Plus, I have a whole collection of quart gaskets to use from. Now, on this one, for some reason, it's not notched correctly for the stock valve cover. So I'm going to take a pair of dikes, cut notches so that they fit, because you want to put the quart gasket on this. It snaps into these little slots here. There's not one here on the back or on the front. And it snaps in. What I'm going to use again is the shellac. I'm just going to use a little bit to hold it together on this side, and then I'll fit the notches in, and then I'll use a little bit on the other side on the intake side, and then set it on. And the torque figure for these valve cover bolts, especially on a stamped steel valve cover, is like 15 foot-pounds, right? It's like 15 foot-pounds. Yeah, it's not much. It's actually extremely light. Otherwise, you will ruin your gasket and you will have leaks everywhere if you do it too tight. Jesus Christ. All right, we are back inside the truck because we can't really continue on until we deal putting the column back together. So we are going to get out these seals. What ended up happening is we took this really long 1/8 inch bit, drilled a hole, and this is the dust shield, so this goes on top. Drilled a small hole on the inner portion, and then we couldn't get it, so we ended up drilling another hole right next to it on the outer portion, and ended up breaking the seal in half. And then once I got it lifted up with a screwdriver, I pried it out, and I did all of that through here, through the inside of the cab. Then there's a circlip right behind that looks like this, and there's a circlip, and it was, now when we took it out, and this is probably stock Ford, this circlip was facing straight down, which made it a pain in the butt to actually get into. What I had to do was I jumped in the engine bay and I put the circlip pliers removals tools, whatever, the circlip pliers, I had to go in and put them straight down and kind of wiggle them into the right spot. And basically my hand was like how it is now. I had to like squeeze it together to find the spot that it fit in, because it barely fit because of the actual size of the outer box was really tight with where the circlip was. So I had to kind of wiggle these just in, but I had to do it from the inside of the engine bay over the top. I couldn't go under, and I couldn't go through here. I had to go from the engine bay. It was just way too hard. And then once I was in there, it was pretty easy, and I squeezed it together and pulled it out, and it came out. So what I did is I already had a hole in it from when I drilled the first. I drilled straight through the first seal into this one so that I could fit these little screws in, and then I drilled another one on the other side, thinking that I would have been able to walk it up, but that didn't really work out. So I just put a pair of vice grips through the column hole, and I started to pull on it, and immediately as I started to pull on it, it just popped out. So it popped right out. So that's how I did it. There might be a better way to do it, but trying to do it inside this car, this truck, is a pain in the butt. But it's done. So now all I have to do is do the reverse, put in the correct seal, and I know which way it goes because this is the way it came out, which means that the open side goes inwards. Put in the correct seal, and then put in the circlip, which might be a little bit of annoying job to do, but it's easier to get in than it is out. And then once the circlip is in, put in the new dust boot that is over here. And this actually comes with a new circlip. I'm still not sure if I want to use it or not, but it does come with one. And what I'm going to do is lube up just the very insides of these. So this goes in just like this, and sits nice and tight on that shaft, and this should stop a lot of your sagging up box leaking. And then this goes in on the back just like that. So it goes seal with the flat side up, circlip, and then dust shield. So that's how it's going to go. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw that back together. I'm not going to be able to show you that, so I'm just going to throw it in. That's the easy part. And then we will put on the other valve cover. And then we finally get to put the steering column back in. Oh, sorry, before the valve cover, we'll put the steering column back in, get that all tightened up and correct. And then once the steering column is in, put the other valve cover on and finish dressing the rest of the motor. So you'll see that in a sec. All right, we're probably pretty much done for today. I don't know if you could hear, but the wind is picking up like crazy. Woo! I don't know what that was, but I'm getting sand blown into my face. Something fell over. This wind is kind of getting crazy, and it's probably extremely loud, so I'll put you in the hood here. Well, we got the column done. It's all back together, and it's all put together again and screwed together. The clip is, the electronics are hooked up, so that's all done. We had to do the U-joint on the new drive shaft, which we had to order a new one, and that ended up being a whole battle by itself. That took about half an hour or maybe 45 minutes to get that old one out. For some reason, it was just getting stuck in there, and we couldn't get it out. But that is done, so it's got the new U-joint in there. We just have to grease it. I went ahead, and since I finished the drive shaft, I put on this valve cover, and then I went ahead and put on the carburetor. I hooked up the PCV and the EG, or the PCV, as well as the vacuum lines, and then the choke and the throttle. So the carb is all hooked up. Carb is ready to go, other than the fuel line, and then this distributor, which this will be the next project for tomorrow. First thing will be, I have to get a new pickup because this one got destroyed. It just fell apart entirely, as you can see. So I have to go. I have a ton of distributors in a bucket in my dad's shed, so I just have to go through and pick one out that has a really nice pickup in it. And then we do have a small issue. We don't have a large housing thermostat. On earlier motors up to 67, I believe it was, that we were talking about, had the larger thermostat. And then Ford went to the slightly smaller thermostat after 67 or 66, whatever year it was. Maybe it was 66. But we have to get a housing because we actually don't have the correct size housing. This old one is the small size. I don't know if you can tell the difference, but it's quite a bit different. So we got to get a housing, and we could order one, and we probably will. And then I got to put the water pump on. I got to connect the fuel up. I got to put all the electronics back together and on, and then the cap and plug wires. And then I got to take the plug out of number 1 and do the distributor, make sure that we get a rough timing so that we can get it close, so that we can get this timed. And then all that's left after that, besides putting on the accessory power steering and then the radiator, all that's left is to hook up the exhaust, which I have to put new studs in because I think that one is missing both studs, and then that one is missing one of the studs. So we have to put new studs on there in order to actually hook up the exhaust. So besides that, so it's just exhaust, water pump, distributor, power steering, assembly, and radiator. And then this thing's back on the road. And starter. I can't forget, I gotta put a starter in it. We won't go anywhere if I don't have a starter. So I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night tonight because the wind is picking up like crazy and I gotta go somewhere. So get what you can done with the time that you have. You may not have an hour and a half to devote to this. You may not have 6 hours to devote this, but if you have 20 minutes, that 20 minutes will get you 20 minutes further than you were before. And it adds up really quick. So I'll see you guys in a sec. All right, it's the next day on the 67. We have a few things to do today. Not too many though, we're getting close. This thing should be up and running by today. So we do have the carb fully hooked up, although I'm going to go back through again and make sure that everything's where it's supposed to be and correct. We have our breather back on, our PCV, our vacuum line that goes to our vacuum gauge, as well as the brake booster vacuum. We have to do the thermostat, we have to do the water pump, we have to redo the distributor, we have to take it apart and fix it, and then we have to put the exhaust studs in and hook up the exhaust, put the starter on, hook up the power steering back to the block, and then put the radiator back in. And then besides that, I believe we have to, we also have to put the alternator back on, as well as change out the ground wire. Cannot forget those things. And then we do have to put the hump back inside the cab. That's no big deal. That's only, I think, 8 bolts or something like that. Just got to do it, but I'll do that last because it's totally not needed to get this thing running. But pretty much right now, what I'm going to do is try to sort out the distributor first, because that's probably the most complicated. And then once I'm done with that, we'll probably move on and do the starter and make sure this thing has a starter going to it, maybe turn it over a few times, and then maybe the exhaust, because those 3 things are the hardest things. And then after that, it's just the thermostat, the water pump, power steering, alternator, and then it's all hooked back up. So let's start with this distributor and I'll show you what's going on. Okay, so I had to go into my parts shed, my dad's parts shed, where he has tons of extra parts, and I pulled out this distributor. Now, this is a stock Ford, it says D5, so this is off of 75, and realistically I could just throw in this distributor and make it work as it is. However, what I would have to do is get a new seal for the distributor seal, because this one is a fresh one and I know this distributor works. So what I'm going to do is show you how to take off the pickup on one of these, specifically so that if your pickup goes bad or you do anything like this where it just breaks apart, and you can put on a nice new one. And so if you bought one off of AutoZone or Amazon or wherever you buy one off of, they are kind of expensive. When I looked up, it was $50 to replace this pickup. So instead I went to my part shed and pulled out this distributor. I'm gonna let that sit for a few minutes and let the PB do its work, and we'll go ahead and actually just throw this on real quick. I didn't even realize when I got this yesterday that this was aluminum. I was sitting here all morning trying to figure out how I'm gonna paint it, and I picked it up and went, wait, this is aluminum. It's freaking cast aluminum. I don't gotta paint this. So we're just gonna put this on as is, because it's pretty much ready to go. All I gotta do is scrape that surface a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and throw it on and just get it done with, so that we at least have that done. So pretty much we're just gonna go ahead and make sure we scrape this surface clean, and we'll go ahead and put some around our housing. Now, because this is aluminum and it's going straight into aluminum, you want to make sure not to over tighten it and break off the end of these flanges. Now that we've let this distributor sit for a little bit, let's see if we can get our pickup piece off. What I'm going to do is use 2 pairs of a pair of screwdrivers to try to lift this out, because basically there's a tiny little roll pin right there. I don't know if you can even see, tiny little roll pin holding it in, and hopefully that PB got some of this rust off. And we're literally just going to carefully stick underneath the edges and try to pry it upwards. And there it goes. That was really easy. It just pries up and off. That actually wasn't too bad at all. And then probably a little bit more. Okay, and there it is, and the roll pin actually stuck in there. Wow, that is really tight. Now I believe these do have a certain position that they kind of sit at. I think it's right about there, which will dictate the position and keep it stable. Put our screws back in. It's stock Ford stuff that does work. Some people don't like DuraSpark. So far, I have not had a single issue with DuraSpark. Okay, and now we put our clip back in to our vacuum advance. Okay, so our clip is back in for our vacuum advance. That basically locates this pickup plate. And now we put our rotor back on. All right, so we're pretty much at the point of needing to put the water pump on in order to get everything else on. Again, this one's kind of a pain in the butt to do. All right, so funny thing, I totally forgot to press record on the time lapse of putting all these on, but we have a filled engine bay. I just finished putting on the fan and tightening up the alternator. I put on the alternator with brackets, put on the power steering pump with its brackets. The fuel line went on. I reattached the fuel line at the bottom because it's going to be annoying to get to later. I put the heater hoses back on. I just temporarily put the coil on. I've got the currently our ground wire, which doesn't look great, and I hate using red wire, but it's what I have and it's heavy duty. I do have to just put the end back on because it fell off. I got to attach the starter still back to the solenoid. I have to tighten up that exhaust bolt and put in a stud and put on that exhaust entirely. I still have to put in the radiator as well as hook up the hose for the radiator on both sides. And then once all that's done, so once I get the radiator in and the hose and I do all the exhaust, then I can worry about the spark plugs and the coil, and I got to take out that spark plug because that's number one, and get the, sorry, you were sideways, get this relatively timed, and then after all that, it's ready to start. So I'm getting really bad at recording this stuff. I don't know if I'm just forgetting or what, but I forgot to show getting the radiator in. It was kind of awkward because I was also doing it by myself, and this is a pretty big, awkward radiator, but I got the hoses connected. As you can see, I have the cap as well as the rotor and the plugs all kind of in here. None of them are connected on the first bank yet, but they are all connected on the second bank. I still have to, what I have to do, I did connect the starter wire, I fixed our ground wire, I tightened up that rear exhaust bolt. I still have to find top dead center on number one. Actually just waiting for my dad to get back so that we can do that. And once that's done, technically this thing should be running and driving. Okay, so we got up to top dead center, got the distributor in place, kind of fixed a few little things. So we take our coil wire right here, set our coil wire on, bada bing, bada boom, and then we take this thing. All right, battery died on me as I was trying to put that cover on. Probably shouldn't have put it on it at this moment because we're still going to have to do a finish timing on it, but whatever, doesn't matter. Now, we're going to actually see if it starts. So, I'm going to hop in here. I'm pretty sure it's in neutral, and make sure it is. We have key on. Let's see. It's going to take a second for gas to pump up. It sounds kind of funny. I'm going to put some carb cleaner in the carb just to get it. Huh? Carb cleaner. Okay. There it goes. Oh, is there oil in it? Huh? Is there oil in it? Well, was there oil in it when you started up originally? Then there's oil in it. Alright, well, there it is. Sounds like a tractor. Sounds like an oscillator. Okay, I didn't want to run it too long, so I turned it off because I got to get some water in it. So it sounds like we do have an exhaust leak on this side, so I'll make sure to get it warmed up first before I actually try to tackle it, because it probably needs to get warm and resit and settle, and then I'll tighten it back up. On this side, I can't tell if there's an exhaust leak. There might be. I'm kind of expecting there to be completely honest, but it does sound like we have a lifter, just a little bit of a lifter noise. So hopefully it's nothing crazy. Hopefully it smooths itself out now that we have the oiling bolt on the correct spot. And I know for a fact the oil in this motor is very sludgy. I'm very, very, very aware that it's sludgy. So once we change the oil tomorrow, hopefully it is a lot better. But I'm gonna go ahead and move this thing over now, just so I can fill it up with some water, just so it can actually run longer. So let's do that now. I did kind of forget, I actually do have a little bit of coolant, so for those who will yell at me for not immediately putting coolant in, I have a bunch of used coolant from emptying the SVO, and it's still pretty good, not rusty or anything. All right, and we got our chrome air cleaner here that desperately needs a polish, but you know, it'll work. Set this on and hook up our ETR. So we want that. Set this on. Okay, so I've got the inspection plate cover back on the back of the bell housing, or no, on the back of the engine. I don't know why I said that. For some reason, the fourth bolt on the passenger side was completely stripped out. So 3 out of 4, that's good, I guess. Nothing crazy. I started and ran it up a little bit with the water. I think I fixed that leak. I might have to get a new hose because the angle on it just really isn't good, and it never was. There definitely is an exhaust leak on that side. There might be one on this side, and there definitely is a huge, huge lifter noise. But we're just gonna close that up. But we can hop inside here, and I've got crap all in the passenger seat, including a completely empty hole. All right, so push the clutch in. Starts right up. And I know, okay, so you gotta remember, over and down, it should be reverse. Okay, well, I guess I'll see you tomorrow when I get this clutch adjusted so that it can actually move under its own power. See you tomorrow. All right, it is the next morning, and I was racking my brain all night last night trying to figure out why the truck wasn't moving, and it took me a few minutes to just realize, oh yeah, I never adjusted the clutch, and the clutch that came off of this motor that we kept on this motor that looked perfectly good and like it was in great shape was physically deeper than the old clutch that we took off. So my clutch linkage was already putting a bunch of preload on the clutch, keeping it separated even when it's fully released. So yeah, I don't know why it never really occurred to me at the moment, but I was just tired and it's been a long few days. So now that I know that, I pretty much just have to go underneath the truck and adjust the clutch, and it's really easy. I'm just going to take the spring off, adjust the rod so it's just barely off the arm, and then put it all back on and should be good to go. Well, that ended up turning out to be a little bit different than I expected. Totally tried to record it, but my dad ended up doing it so quickly because, and I'll show you why. But we got it running now, and I tested the clutch, and it works now. So bada bing, bada boom. Gonna let it run for a little bit just so it can warm up, so I can get that sludgy oil warm, so that when I do the oil change, it's easy and it flows out nice. Sounds good. Still has an exhaust leak I gotta fix. But this is the equalizer bar that we took out. This is your clutch that pushes on the fork, and then there's a big hex coned tip that goes on the end of it. This one, if you could see, is severely worn. It's supposed to be more of a D shape and not worn out this much, and it's also welded. And compared to the one that we just put in, it's about 1.5 inches longer than the one that we put in. So someone welded this piece of hardened steel onto this to make it longer for some reason. Don't know why, but they needed it longer. So the one that we put on is a stock one that came off of the truck that this motor came out of, and put it in. He put about 1/8 inch of adjustment in it, which he thinks he should have put 1/4 inch, but to be honest, I think there's just enough pedal play that 1/8 inch is probably good. But it seems to work. I've yet to actually move it because I'm putting things away. But I'm gonna go ahead and close the hood and take it out for a little drive. So let's do that. All right, and releasing the parking brake, throwing it in reverse, and it moves. Okay, we're off to a good start. I can, whoa, some exhaust fumes coming through the floor. I would say that's a success. Cool, let's do an oil change. All right, we got the drain plug out and it is draining and it's pretty much just about done. Really hate the factory Ford drain plug spot. It's terrible. It's right under the cross member, so the oil just drops under the cross member and then rolls off. All right, let's see if we can get this off. Okay, that's gonna need a tool. All right, got this tool, and we're gonna very, very kindly hope that it does good. There it goes. Okay, I've got our oil and our Motorcraft filter. When doing FEs, it's probably a good idea to try to use the Motorcraft filters. This is an FL-1-A, which is the standard. This actually it was got for the wagon behind here. Same with the oil. It's covered in dust right now, but it works on all FEs pretty much, as long as the oil filter housing is in the correct spot, because it is tall. They do have shorter stubby versions, but this is what's good for my application, and I like using the Motorcraft stuff. It tends to be better and work better, and it's formulated specifically for these motors. So how hot is that? Not that hot, but drop this in and screw it on. And again, just hand tight. If you can't take it out, if you can't put it on with just one hand, it's too tight. Okay, I've got my makeshift funnel. That works totally fine for this. And there it goes. Go ahead and take our makeshift filter, or our makeshift funnel out, and go ahead and put our breather back on. Take a look at it, and honestly it doesn't look too great, but we're just going to pretend like we didn't see that. Close up on that. So boom. Let's start it up again. Put that in there. Probably should make sure it's out of gear first. Try it again. Let's see. Oil pressure? Oil pressure? There it goes. There it goes. It's really taking a sec to get that oil pressure. Alright, it's back up. Well, there you have it. That's the 1967 F250 motor and trans swap from a 360 with a T18 to a 390 with an NP435. I hope you guys enjoyed watching that. I hope you got as frustrated as I did when things went wrong, or so have it. Can't predict these things. Things happen all the time. Not everything goes its way. This was supposed to be a 1 or 2 day job. It turned into a 4 or 5 day job. It is what it is, but it's done and it runs. I still gotta fix the exhaust leak, and there's a bunch of little things I gotta tune up and fix, like timing, as well as putting the hump back on the transmission tunnel. And then I think we also have to fix our U-joint, because I'm pretty sure it was installed backwards, and there is a compression factor on those, so they have to be installed the right way. So we'll probably fix those things up, but you will see this thing very soon. I'm gonna have a bunch of videos coming out on this thing, so stay tuned, because it's pretty much gonna get a whole overhaul. Now that it runs and drives, we can pretty much start getting it ready to get repainted, because I am going to go back to the factory color, which is our Wimbledon white bottom with a lime gold top, which you can get a sneak peek of because the interior is still lime gold, as you can see. And this whole interior is going to get a complete refresh. We're going to get a new / used dash. We're going to get door panels and fix this situation. We're going to replace all the window rubber and make sure this thing sounds and seals great, as well as dynamatting or kill matting, or whatever you want to say, sound insulation across the whole floor, all inside the doors, in the headliner, as well as behind, because this thing sounds like a tin drum. And the most exciting part is that this bad boy is going to go back to its bucket seat glory. We're going to get bucket seats back in this thing, because in 67 you could get bucket seats, and I'm putting the factory bucket seats back in this thing. So yeah, this whole interior is going to be our next overhaul. So you'll see that coming soon. So stay tuned and make sure you keep watching. If you like watching stuff about trucks, this is going to be a great series for you. And if you enjoyed this, please like, comment, subscribe. Do what you got to do for YouTube. I appreciate you staying to the end, and we'll catch you next time. See ya.